The morning sun painted the rolling hills of Sonoma Valley in shades of gold and amber as I stood on the terrace of Hillcrest Vineyard, watching the mist rise from the vines that had been in my family for 3 generations. My name is Emma, and at 37, I'd built my financial consulting firm from nothing but determination and sleepless nights. While other daughters might have leaned on their family's resources, I'd carved my own path through the corporate world, learning that true success tastes sweeter when you've earned every penny yourself. The memory of 6 months ago still burns fresh in my mind, like the first sip of a bold Cabernet that catches you off guard. It was a Tuesday evening when my phone rang, displaying my mother's number. I'd just finished a 12-hour day, finalizing a major client acquisition, and all I wanted was a glass of wine and silence. But the tremor in her voice when she said hello made me sit up straight on my couch. "Emma, sweetheart," she'd begun, and I could hear my father's muffled voice in the background, along with what sounded like papers rustling. "We need to talk to you about something important. It's about the vineyard. The bank, they're threatening foreclosure. We have 30 days, or we lose everything your grandfather built." The words hit me like a physical blow. Hillcrest Vineyard wasn't just a business. It was our family's soul poured into the soil, tended with love through droughts and plenty alike. I remembered being 8 years old, following my grandfather through the rows of vines as he taught me to read the leaves, to understand the language of the grapes. While my younger sister Madison spent her summers at dance camps and cheerleading practices, I was learning about terroir and tannins, about the patience required to coax perfection from the earth. "How much do you need?" I'd asked, already pulling up my investment accounts on my laptop. The number they quoted made me catch my breath. $875,000. It was everything I had saved, every bonus carefully invested, every luxury foregone in favor of building my financial security. But family is family, and some things matter more than numbers on a screen. "I'll transfer it tomorrow," I'd said, hearing my mother's sob of relief. My father got on the phone then, his voice thick with emotion. "Jessica, we'll never forget this. You're saving our legacy, and we'll make sure you're taken care of. This investment will secure your place in the family business forever. We promise you that." Those words echoed in my mind now as I stood in the decorated barn, watching the harvest celebration unfold around me. The space glowed with string lights and autumn flowers, filled with the laughter of wine club members and local dignitaries. My father stood at the makeshift stage, tapping the microphone to get everyone's attention. He looked distinguished in his navy blazer, the one reserved for special occasions, and my mother beamed beside him in a dress I recognized as new. "Ladies and gentlemen, friends and family," he began, his voice carrying that particular tone of pride that made my stomach tighten with an inexplicable dread. "Today marks not just our annual harvest celebration, but a momentous occasion for Hillcrest Vineyard. As many of you know, running a family business requires both tradition and innovation, both roots in the past and vision for the future." I shifted my weight, the wine glass in my hand suddenly feeling heavy. Beside me, our head winemaker Carlos caught my eye with a questioning look. He'd been there the day I'd made the transfer, had seen me sign away my life savings with a steady hand while my parents promised me the world. My father continued, his words flowing like honey over broken glass. "That's why we're thrilled to announce that Madison, fresh from completing her MBA at Northwestern, will be taking over as CEO of Hillcrest Vineyard. Her business acumen, combined with her fresh perspective and innovative ideas, will lead us into a new era of growth and prosperity." The applause that erupted felt like thunder in my ears. I watched, frozen, as Madison stepped forward in her designer dress, the one that cost more than most of our workers made in a month. Her smile was radiant, practiced, the same one she'd perfected for her Instagram posts featuring vineyard sunsets and carefully staged wine tastings. This was the same sister who, just last Christmas, had confused our Pinot Noir with a Merlot, laughing it off with a casual, "They all taste like wine to me anyway." My mother appeared at my elbow, her touch gentle but her words cutting deeper than any knife. "Emma, honey, I hope you understand. Madison's degree makes her the natural choice for the business side of things. You know how important formal education is in today's market." I forced my face into a smile that felt like shattered glass. "Of course, Mom. Madison will do wonderfully." I raised my glass in a toast, my voice steady despite the earthquake in my chest, to the new CEO of Hillcrest Vineyard. May she lead us to great heights. The words tasted like ash, but I delivered them with the same grace I'd learned in boardrooms, where showing weakness meant losing millions. As the crowd surged forward to congratulate Madison, I slipped out the side door into the cool October evening. The stars above seemed to mock me with their indifference, and I pulled out my phone with hands that barely trembled. Scrolling through my contacts, I found the name I'd hoped never to need: Sophia Chen, the sharpest corporate attorney in Northern California. We'd met at wine industry events, and she'd always impressed me with her ability to see through facades to the truth beneath. I typed out a message, each word a small betrayal of the family I'd tried so hard to save. Need your expertise on a family business matter. Are you available to meet tomorrow? The situation is complicated and time-sensitive. Her response came within minutes. My office, 9 a.m. Bring every document you have. Family disputes are my specialty. I stood there in the darkness, listening to the celebration continue inside. Madison's laughter rang out, bright and careless, followed by my father's booming voice, telling stories about her business school achievements. Not one word about who had actually saved the vineyard from foreclosure. Not one mention of the daughter who'd given everything. The next morning found me in Sophia's downtown San Francisco office, the city sprawling below us through floor-to-ceiling windows. She sat across from me, her expression growing more incredulous as she reviewed the bank statements showing my transfer. "Let me understand this correctly," she said, setting down the papers with deliberate care. "You transferred $875,000, your entire life savings, without any written agreement? No promissory note, no contract, not even an email confirmation of their promises?" "They're my family," I replied, the words tasting more bitter with each passing hour. When they called about the foreclosure, all I could think about was saving our legacy. 3 generations of winemaking, about to be lost. I found out later they'd over-leveraged the property to pay for Madison's MBA and to build a new tasting room that she insisted would revolutionize our customer experience. Sophia leaned back in her leather chair, her fingers steepled. "Tell me exactly what they promised when you made the transfer. Every word you can remember." I closed my eyes, returning to that day in my father's office. Dad said I was saving the family, that this investment would secure my place in the business forever. He kept saying we take care of our own, that blood is thicker than water. Mom was crying, talking about how proud Grandpa would be, how they'd make sure I was properly rewarded for my sacrifice. Was anyone else present during these conversations? "Yes," I said, opening my eyes with new hope. "Marcus Chen, our CFO. He was there when I came to arrange the transfer. He kept suggesting we put something in writing, actually seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation. But my parents dismissed him, saying formal contracts would be an insult to family trust." Sophia's expression sharpened. Marcus could be crucial. His testimony could establish that verbal promises were made and that your parents actively discouraged documentation. She pulled out a legal pad and began writing. "Here's what I propose. We start with a demand letter, giving them 30 days to repay your investment plus interest. 8% annually is standard for this type of loan." I shifted in my seat. What if they refuse? Then we file a lawsuit for breach of verbal contract and potentially fraud. The discovery process will open their books to scrutiny. Something tells me your sister's MBA hasn't prepared her for that level of crisis management. She paused, studying my face. "But I need to know what you really want here, Emma. Do you want to run the vineyard?" I thought about it, really thought about it. Part of me had dreamed of following in my grandfather's footsteps, of being the one to carry on his legacy. But that dream had curdled into something else now. "No," I said finally. "I want my money back, with interest. Let Madison have her CEO title. I'll use my money to start something new, something that will make them understand what they've lost." Sophia smiled, a sharp expression that reminded me of a hawk spotting prey. "Perfect. Competition is the best revenge in business. Now, let's draft this demand letter. We'll make it clear that their actions constitute verbal fraud, that we have witness testimony, and that the alternative to repayment is a very public, very messy legal battle." As she began typing, I felt something shift inside me. The little girl who'd followed her grandfather through the vines was gone, replaced by a woman who understood that family could betray you just as easily as any corporate rival. Maybe more easily, because you never saw it coming. The demand letter hit Hillcrest Vineyard like a late spring frost, devastating and unexpected. I was in my home office, reviewing potential properties for my own vineyard, when Madison called. Her voice crackled with the kind of panic I'd never heard from her before. "A lawsuit? Are you out of your mind?" she shrieked. "You're going to destroy everything our family has built. Dad's having chest pains. Mom can't stop crying. How could you do this to us?" I let her rant, counting my breaths the way I did before big presentations. When she finally paused for air, I spoke calmly. "The solution is simple, Madison. Return my investment with interest. $875,000 plus 8% for 6 months. You have an MBA. I'm sure you can calculate the total. That money saved the vineyard. It's part of your heritage, too." Her voice turned sly, the way it had when we were children, and she thought she'd found a loophole in our parents' rules. "Besides, your lawyer should know that verbal agreements in family businesses are nearly impossible to prove. You have nothing in writing." "Actually," I said, allowing myself a small smile, "I just finished a very interesting phone call with Marcus Chen. Remember him? The CFO who was present when I made the transfer? He's provided a sworn statement about that day, how he advised putting our agreement in writing, and how Dad specifically promised that my investment would secure my place in the business leadership." The silence on the other end stretched so long, I wondered if she'd hung up. Then, "Wait, Dad wants to talk to you." My father's voice came through the phone, strained and angry in a way that transported me back to childhood scoldings. "Emma, what are you doing to us? After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? Everything you've done for me?" I let out a laugh that surprised us both. "Let's talk about that, Dad. While you paid for Madison's undergraduate degree, her MBA, her apartment, her car, I built my own life without asking for a cent. The only time I ever asked for anything was when you promised me a future at Hillcrest in exchange for saving it from foreclosure." "We never promised you control," he protested. "Madison has the education for this. She understands modern business practices." "I'm not asking for control anymore," I interrupted. "I'm asking for my money back. Money you took knowing exactly what you planned to do with it. Money that went to Madison's Mercedes and your trip to Tuscany last month, instead of just saving the vineyard." His voice shifted, taking on the wheedling tone he'd used when I was young, and he needed me to cover for Madison's mistakes. "Sweetheart, be reasonable. The vineyard doesn't have that kind of liquid capital right now. We'd have to take out another loan, go deeper into debt. Then I suggest you start talking to banks. You have 25 days left before Sophia files the lawsuit. And Dad, every financial decision made since my investment will be scrutinized, including that new equipment that coincidentally appeared right after Madison's car purchase." I could hear muffled voices in the background, my mother's rising above the rest. Then she came on the line, her voice thick with tears. "Emma, please, come to dinner. We can work this out as a family. We always have before. We're not family right now, Mom. We're business associates in a dispute. Have your lawyer contact Sophia with your response." I ended the call, my hands shaking slightly as I set the phone down. Within minutes, my phone began buzzing with messages from extended family. Aunts and uncles I hadn't heard from in years suddenly had opinions about family loyalty. Cousins posted passive-aggressive messages on social media about the importance of forgiveness. I ignored them all and returned to my laptop, where I'd been researching available vineyard properties. The Rosewood estate caught my eye again. 200 acres of prime vineyard land, just across the valley from Hillcrest. The soil reports were exceptional, the water rights secure, and most appealingly, the elevation would allow me to produce wines that would directly compete with Hillcrest's award-winning reserves. The property needed work, but I could see its potential spreading before me like a map to redemption. The following week brought a revelation that shook me more than my family's initial betrayal. Marcus Chen had asked to meet for coffee, choosing a small cafe in the city where we wouldn't be recognized. He arrived carrying a thick folder, his usual calm demeanor replaced by visible anxiety. "There's something you need to see," he said after we'd ordered. "I've been going through the books since your demand letter arrived, trying to prepare for potential negotiations. The numbers tell a story I don't think you know." He opened the folder, revealing detailed financial records with numerous entries highlighted in yellow. I leaned forward as he began to explain. Your $875,000 didn't just save the vineyard from foreclosure, Emma. It funded a series of personal expenses that were carefully disguised as business costs. He pointed to specific entries. The new Mercedes your sister drives? Listed as a delivery vehicle. Your parents' trip to Tuscany? Market research. Even portions of Madison's MBA were backdated and listed as employee education expenses. I stared at the numbers, feeling sick. They used my investment as a personal piggy bank? Marcus nodded grimly. But here's the worst part. 2 weeks before they announced Madison as CEO, they registered a new company, Hillcrest Holdings, LLC. They've been quietly transferring vineyard assets to this new entity. The original company, the one you invested in, is being systematically emptied of value. The coffee cup rattled as I set it down too hard. They're ensuring I can't claim anything, even if I win. Exactly. Your investment saved a company they're now abandoning. The new entity, which Madison is CEO of, has no obligation to honor any promises made by the original company. He slid the folder across to me. Your lawyer needs to see this immediately. But you didn't get it from me. I'm already looking for a new job. I can't be associated with this kind of financial manipulation. I took the folder with numb hands. All those years of family dinners, of being told we were building something together, of believing blood meant something. It had all been a performance, and I'd been the only one who didn't know my role. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. Family meeting tonight. Don't bring your lawyer. Last chance to fix this like family. I showed Marcus the message. He shook his head slowly. They must know I've been looking into the records. They're either going to try to convince you to back down or threaten you, maybe both. You know how these meetings go, I said, remembering countless similar gatherings where Madison's problems became family problems that somehow I was always expected to solve. They'll make me the villain for not protecting the family name. Marcus reached across the table and touched my hand briefly. You're not the villain here, Emma. You're just the only one with the courage to call them what they are. I texted Madison back. Any discussion happens with lawyers present. Her response was immediate. Your choice, but don't come crying when this gets ugly. I immediately called Sophia and sent her photos of every document Marcus had provided. Her sharp intake of breath told me everything. This changes the game completely, she said. We're not just talking about breach of contract anymore. This is fraud, potentially criminal fraud. The asset transfers, the disguised personal expenses, the new LLC, it's a pattern of deliberate deception. I don't want them in jail, I said quickly, despite everything. Then we use this as leverage. I'm drafting an amended demand letter right now. Instead of 30 days, they have 48 hours to return your investment with interest or face an investigation that will involve the SEC, the IRS, and potentially the FBI. The choice is theirs. After ending the call, I sat in the cafe long after Marcus had left, staring at the damning evidence of my family's betrayal. Outside, life went on normally, people laughing and chatting, unaware that my entire world had shifted on its axis. I opened my laptop and pulled up the Rosewood Estate listing again. The morning sun would hit those eastern slopes perfectly, I noted. The soil composition was ideal for Pinot Noir, which would let me compete directly with Hillcrest's signature wine. My phone continued to buzz with messages from family members, but I ignored them all. They'd chosen their side the day they took my money and gave my sister my future. Now it was time for me to choose mine. The amended demand letter exploded through Hillcrest Vineyard like wildfire in a drought. I was in the middle of a virtual tour of Rosewood Estate's facilities when my father burst into my apartment, using the key I'd forgotten he had. He waved the letter like a flag of surrender, his face flushed and breathing hard. Criminal charges? He wheezed. Your own family? I raised you better than this, Emma. I calmly closed my laptop, hiding the images of Rosewood's state-of-the-art production facility. Did you raise me to accept being robbed? Because that's what you did. Took my $875,000 and used it for Mercedes payments and Italian vacations while plotting to lock me out of any ownership through your shell company scheme. We never meant for it to go this far, he started, but I cut him off with a raised hand. Save it, Dad! I've seen the financial records, the new LLC, the asset transfers, every manipulated expense. You didn't just betray me, You tried to make sure I couldn't even fight back. I stood, drawing on the same strength that had carried me through hostile takeover negotiations. You have 40 hours left to return my investment with interest, or Sophia files everything with the SEC and the FBI. His flush deepened to an alarming purple. You'd destroy your sister's future? She just started as CEO. Madison's future? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. What about mine? I earned that money through 60-hour weeks and sacrificed vacations while she was posting Instagram stories from business school. Money you promised would secure my place in the family business. We can still work something out, he pleaded. His tone shifting to desperation. Maybe Madison could share the CEO position. A co-leadership arrangement. You two could run it together. I shook my head slowly. I don't want to share anything with Madison anymore. I want my money back, every penny plus interest. Then you'll never have to worry about me interfering with your precious CEO's plans again. His eyes narrowed at something in my tone. What does that mean? As if on cue, my phone rang. The timing was perfect. It was the real estate agent handling Rosewood Estate. I answered on speaker, watching my father's face. Emma, wonderful news. The sellers are very interested in your offer. They're impressed by your business plan and your vision for revitalizing their heritage vines. When can you come see the property in person? I kept my eyes on my father as his expression crumbled with understanding. Rosewood Estate was Hillcrest's oldest rival. Back in my grandfather's day, they'd battled for every award, every accolade. Only the previous owner's retirement and disinterest from his children had allowed the vineyard to fall into genteel decline. You wouldn't, he whispered. Wouldn't what? Use my expertise to restore a legendary vineyard? Apply everything Grandpa taught me about winemaking while Madison was at cheerleading practice? I turned back to my phone. I can visit tomorrow afternoon. I'll bring my CFO to review the facilities. Your grandfather would be ashamed, he said, playing his last emotional card. No, I replied quietly. He'd be proud that I'm not letting you and Madison destroy his legacy with your greed. He taught me that great wine comes from honest work and genuine passion, neither of which Madison has ever shown. I gestured toward the door. You have 39 hours now. Tick-tock. He left without another word, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the pictures on my wall. Within minutes, my phone exploded with messages from Madison. Her texts grew increasingly frantic and then angry. You're just jealous of my success, she wrote. You've always resented that I was the pretty one, the popular one. Now you can't stand that I'm the successful one too. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I blocked her number and returned to planning my future. Rosewood Estate would need significant investment to return to its former glory. But I could see it clearly, the replanted vines heavy with grapes, the renovated tasting room filled with wine lovers, the awards that would once again challenge Hillcrest's dominance. Rachel texted with an update. Their lawyer has been calling banks all afternoon, lots of shouting. Your mother tried to withdraw from their retirement accounts, but needs your father's signature, which he's refusing to give. I smiled grimly. They were learning what it felt like to scramble for money, to face the possibility of losing everything. The same terror they'd put me through 6 months ago, only now the tables had turned. With just 12 hours left on the deadline, my mother appeared at my office door. She carried a manila envelope and wore the same expression she'd used throughout our childhood, whenever Madison had gotten in trouble and needed someone to blame. Your father had to be sedated, she announced, sinking uninvited into the chair across from my desk. His blood pressure spiked to dangerous levels. The doctor said he needs to avoid stress. Are you happy now? I kept my expression neutral, a skill honed through years of difficult client meetings. What's in the envelope, Mom? She slid it across the desk, like it physically pained her. The best we can do. We mortgaged everything we could. There's $600,000 here. The bank wouldn't give us more without a full audit, and we both know what they'd find. We can pay the rest in installments. I didn't touch the envelope. That wasn't the deal. $875,000 plus interest. All of it, or Sophia files in the morning. We don't have it, she snapped, her composed facade cracking like old paint. Madison's been calling every bank in California. No one will lend us that much without examining the books, and you know we can't allow that. I leaned forward slightly. Because they'd find exactly what I found? Like how you used my investment to pay for Madison's MBA instead of just saving the vineyard? Or how you've been transferring assets to that new LLC to prevent me from claiming any ownership? Her face went very still. How did you find out about that? I have copies of everything, every transaction, every transfer, every fraudulent expense report. Did you really think no one would notice? Did you think I'd just accept being robbed because we share DNA? She switched tactics, leaning forward with tears gathering in her eyes. Think about what you're doing, Emma. If you file those papers, it won't just hurt us. The vineyard's reputation will be ruined. All those people who depend on us for their livelihoods, the workers who've been with us for decades, the distributors who've built their businesses around our wines. You destroy them all just to spite your sister? Don't you dare put this on me, I said, my voice hard as granite. You and Dad chose this path the moment you decided to steal my investment. You're the ones who put everyone's jobs at risk, not me. We didn't steal anything, she began, but I cut her off. Let me show you something. I turned my laptop around, displaying the Rosewood Estate website I'd been updating with my plans. Beautiful, isn't it? Premium terroir, perfect sun exposure, and enough acreage to eventually surpass Hillcrest's production. The owner accepts my offer tomorrow, unless I get my money back tonight. My mother's eyes widened as she recognized the property, understood the implications. Rosewood had been Hillcrest's nemesis for 50 years. You can't. It would destroy us. The competition alone. Then I suggest you and Madison get creative in the next 11 hours. Sell her Mercedes, mortgage your house, liquidate your retirement accounts, call in every favor you've ever earned. I don't care how you do it, but I want every penny by midnight. She stood on shaky legs, looking older than I'd ever seen her. You've changed, Emma. You've become hard, cruel. This isn't how we raised you. No, Mom, I said quietly. I've just stopped letting you manipulate me. The money or the lawsuit, those are your only options now. After she left, I called Sophia to update her. They offered partial payment, I reported. $600,000. Stay firm, she advised. They're more desperate than they're letting on. Their lawyer has been reaching out to every financial institution in Northern California. Also, someone named James Morrison from Valley National Bank has been trying to reach you, says it's urgent. I sat up straighter. James Morrison was Madison's college ex-boyfriend, the one who'd broken up with her because she'd maxed out his credit cards without asking. He now worked as a senior loan officer at one of the region's largest banks. I called him immediately. Emma, thank God, he said without preamble. I've been reviewing Hillcrest's emergency loan application. The irregularities are staggering. I can't approve anything without a full forensic audit, but there's another option. I listened as he explained. Valley National had recently started a program investing in family wineries, providing not just loans, but operational oversight to ensure sustainability. They'd get their money, but at the cost of financial independence. The bank would require full transparency, board seats, and approval for any expenditure over $10,000, James explained. Your parents would essentially become employees in their own vineyard, but they'd get the capital they need. I thought for a moment, then texted my father, there's a solution that doesn't involve me or the SEC. Call James Morrison at Valley National. You have 90 minutes. Madison's response came almost immediately. You think some bank taking over is better than family? You're destroying everything Grandpa built. I thought about our grandfather, about the careful way he'd tended the vines and the pride in his eyes when he'd shown me the first harvest. His legacy wasn't in corporate structures or CEO titles. It was in the wine itself, in the love of the land that Madison had never shown and my parents had forgotten. With 30 minutes left, Marcus texted me updates from his contacts still at Hillcrest. Your father is reviewing loan documents. Madison is screaming at the bank representatives. Your mother has gone through an entire bottle of wine. I waited, my phone close at hand. The $875,000 had ceased to be about mere money. It was about justice, about making them face the consequences of their choices, about proving that I wouldn't be the family doormat anymore. 20 minutes left, and my father called. His voice was rough, defeated. The bank wants operational control for 5 years, 2 board seats, approval rights on all major decisions. We'd be figureheads in our own vineyard. Better than federal prison, I replied coolly. 20 minutes to decide. If we do this, if we let the bank take control and repay your investment, will you drop everything? No SEC filing, no competing vineyard? I considered his words carefully. Sign with the bank, repay my investment with interest in full, and I'll walk away. You'll never have to worry about me competing with Madison's leadership again. There was a long pause. Your mother thinks we should call your bluff. She says you're too soft to really file with the SEC, that you won't risk the family name. 15 minutes to find out, I said simply. The line went dead. I turned to watch the clock, each minute crawling by like honey dripping from a spoon. With 5 minutes left, my phone buzzed with an email from James Morrison. The subject line read, "Loan documents executed." The attached files showed my parents' signatures on Valley National's agreement, along with a wire transfer confirmation for $875,000 plus interest, directed to my account. The bank would take control of Hillcrest's finances within 24 hours. Looks like they chose survival over pride, Sophia said when I forwarded her the confirmation. I nodded, already pulling up my real estate agent's number. But instead of Rosewood Estate, I had my eye on something even better. Canyon Ridge Vineyard, on the opposite side of the valley. Better water rights, newer facilities, and most importantly, no direct view of Hillcrest. I didn't need to see them to beat them. 2 months later, I stood among the dormant vines of Canyon Ridge Vineyard, my vineyard, watching the winter sun paint the valley in shades of gold and shadow. Marcus stood beside me, having officially started as my CFO the week before. He'd brought 3 of Hillcrest's best workers with him, by people who'd been there since my grandfather's time and remembered when the family actually valued loyalty. Madison is having a complete breakdown, he reported, scrolling through his phone. The bank rejected her proposal for $1 million tasting room renovation. They told her to focus on wine quality and cost management instead of Instagram aesthetics. I smiled, remembering the bank's first board meeting, which James had gleefully recounted. They'd immediately canceled the Mercedes lease, returning it for a practical truck. The Tuscany wine tours were scrapped in favor of investing in new fermentation tanks. Madison's MBA was proving useless against actual financial oversight and fiscal responsibility. My phone buzzed with its weekly text from my mother about healing the family and forgiveness being divine. I deleted it without reading, as had become my habit. My father hadn't spoken to me since signing the bank documents, maintaining his silence like a punishment. But last week, I'd received a package that meant more than any words they could offer. Inside was my grandfather's leather-bound journal, filled with decades of handwritten notes about soil composition, weather patterns, and his secret techniques for coaxing magic from the grapes. The accompanying note, in my father's careful script, read simply, "This belongs with someone who understands its value." I held that journal now, its worn leather soft beneath my fingers. Soon, these dormant vines would wake with spring's warmth. In 3 years, they'd produce their first harvest under my care. In 5 years, Canyon Ridge wines would compete directly with Hillcrest's finest offerings. But I didn't need their validation anymore. I had something more valuable. The knowledge that I'd stood up for myself, that I'd refused to be used, and that I'd turned their betrayal into my beginning. Ready to start planning for spring? Marcus asked, gesturing toward the crew waiting with soil testing equipment. I tucked my grandfather's journal into my jacket, feeling its familiar weight against my heart. Let's make wine that would make him proud. As we walked toward the crew, I thought about Madison struggling with bank oversight and spreadsheets she didn't understand. I thought about my parents, reduced to figureheads in the vineyard they'd mortgaged their integrity to control. And I thought about myself standing in my own vineyard, built with my own money, following my own vision. The sun climbed higher, warming the dormant vines that would soon burst with new life. Across the valley, Hillcrest stood like a monument to everything I'd left behind. But here at Canyon Ridge, the future spread before me like an unwritten page, waiting for me to fill it with the story of wine made with integrity, passion, and the kind of love my grandfather would recognize. Marcus handed me the soil report from our first test plot, and I smiled at the perfect pH levels. We weren't just going to make wine. We were going to make something extraordinary, something that would prove that the best revenge isn't served cold, it's served in a perfectly balanced glass of Pinot Noir that wins every award your family's vineyard used to claim. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of earth and possibility. I opened my grandfather's journal to the first page, where his careful script offered the wisdom I'd build my empire on. Great wine comes from honest work, genuine passion, and soil that's never been poisoned by betrayal. I was ready to begin. The first year at Canyon Ridge tested every skill I'd learned in the corporate world and every lesson my grandfather had whispered among the vines. Spring arrived with unusual frost warnings, and I found myself out into the fields at 3 in the morning with Marcus and our small crew, setting up frost protection systems. My hands went numb from the cold as we worked to save the delicate new growth, but I wouldn't have been anywhere else. "You know," Marcus said during one of those freezing mornings, his breath forming clouds in the darkness, "your sister posted another Instagram story from the warm tasting room complaining about early morning bank meetings." I laughed, adjusting the sprinkler system that would coat the vines with a protective layer of ice. At least she's learning that running a vineyard involves more than photo opportunities, though I doubt she's ever experienced the satisfaction of saving a harvest with your own hands. Those early days blurred together in a symphony of soil tests, vine training, and endless planning. I hired Elena Vasquez as my head winemaker, stealing her from a prestigious Napa winery with the promise of complete creative freedom. She arrived with decades of experience and a passion for sustainable farming that aligned perfectly with my vision. "Your grandfather would have loved this," she told me one afternoon as we walked the rows, examining the young vine's progress. "He understood that great wine starts in the vineyard, not the boardroom. I worked harvest with him once, years ago, before your parents shifted focus to marketing over quality." "Tell me about it," I said, hungry for any stories about the man who'd shaped my understanding of wine. Elena smiled, her weathered hands gentle on the vine leaves. "It was 1995, a difficult year. Late rain threatened the entire harvest. Your grandfather spent 3 straight days in the fields, checking sugar levels every few hours, waiting for exactly the right moment to pick. Your parents wanted to harvest early, play it safe, but he waited, trusting his instincts and the vines. That year's Pinot won every major competition. He knew the land like it was part of his soul. That's what I want to build here," I said, looking out over the valley. "A vineyard that honors the old ways while embracing innovation. Wine that tells the truth about where it comes from." As summer progressed, word spread through the wine community about what we were doing at Canyon Ridge. Journalists started calling, intrigued by the story of a financial consultant who'd walked away from family legacy to build something new. I turned down most interview requests, preferring to let our work speak for itself. But when Wine Spectator reached out, I made an exception. The reporter, a sharp woman named Catherine Wells, arrived on a blazing July afternoon. She found me in the fermentation room with Elena, tasting samples from different barrels. "So, Emma," she began, her recorder discreet between us, "the wine world is buzzing about Canyon Ridge, a new player with serious funding and even more serious talent. But what everyone really wants to know is about your connection to Hillcrest Vineyard. Care to comment on the family rivalry angle?" I swirled the Chardonnay in my glass, considering my words carefully. "There's no rivalry. Canyon Ridge stands on its own merits. We're focused on producing exceptional wines that express our unique terroir. What happens at other vineyards, including Hillcrest, isn't our concern." Catherine smiled like she didn't quite believe me. "Yet you've hired several of Hillcrest's most experienced employees. Your head winemaker trained under your grandfather. Some might say you're deliberately trying to outdo your family's vineyard." I set down my glass and met her gaze directly. "I hired the best people available, who shared my vision for quality and integrity. If some of them happen to work at Hillcrest, that speaks more to the treatment they received there than any plan of mine. Canyon Ridge isn't about competing with anyone. It's about creating something authentic and exceptional." But the truth was more complicated. Every decision I made, from which varietals to plant to how we designed our tasting room, was informed by my desire to prove something. Not to them anymore, but to myself. That I could build something lasting without compromising my values. The interview was published in September, just as our first small harvest began. Though we wouldn't produce wine for sale for another 2 years, Elena wanted to create test batches to understand our terroir. I joined the picking crew myself, working alongside migrant workers who seemed surprised to see the owner with purple-stained hands and aching backs. During those long harvest days, Maria, one of our most experienced pickers, took me under her wing. She'd worked harvest for 40 years, moving between vineyards with the seasons. As we filled bin after bin with perfectly ripe clusters, she shared her philosophy. "The grapes know when someone cares," she said in accented English, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. "They taste different when picked with love versus obligation. Your grandfather, he understood this. He'd work beside us, learn our names, ask about our families." She paused, glancing toward Hillcrest visible in the distance. "Things changed there when he passed. Now it's just business." "How do you mean?" I asked, though I suspected I knew. Maria shrugged. "The new CEO she drives through in her fancy car, waves like we're scenery. Promises improvements, but cuts our hours to save money. Many of us left when we heard you were hiring. We remember you as a little girl, following your grandfather, asking so many questions. You see the vines, not just the profit." Her words stayed with me through the exhausting days of harvest. When the last grapes were in and the crew gathered to celebrate, I stood to make a toast. In Spanish, I'd been practicing. I thanked them for their dedication and announced that Canyon Ridge would be implementing year-round contracts for our core crew, with health benefits and retirement contributions. The cheer that went up was worth more than any wine score could ever be. As autumn painted the valley in shades of gold and crimson, I received an unexpected visitor. James Morrison appeared at the winery on a Saturday afternoon, looking uncomfortable in his banker's suit among the rustic beauty of Canyon Ridge. "I probably shouldn't be here," he said, as I led him to our makeshift tasting room. "Really just a converted barn with a few tables and chairs. But I thought you should know what's happening at Hillcrest." I poured us both glasses of Elena's test batch Pinot Noir, noting with satisfaction how the color caught the light. "Valley National isn't happy?" James took a sip, his eyebrows rising at the quality. "That's an understatement. Your sister has fought them on every decision. She submitted a proposal for $1 million renovation that would have included a spa and yoga studio. When they rejected it, she tried to go around them to other investors, violating the loan terms. Sounds like Madison hasn't adjusted to oversight," I said neutrally. "It's worse than that," James continued. "She's been caught inflating visitor numbers and wine club memberships to make her performance look better. The bank's forensic accountants found discrepancies in inventory reports too. Bottles missing without explanation, probably given away to influencers for social media coverage." I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Vindication, certainly, but also sadness. Hillcrest had been more than a business. It was our heritage. And they're letting the bank know all this? "Your father reported it," James said, surprising me. Apparently, he and Madison had a massive fight when the auditors arrived. He accused her of destroying the vineyard's reputation for Instagram likes. She accused him of being stuck in the past. Your mother sided with Madison, and now they're barely speaking. Family unity was the one thing they'd always prized above all else, the reason they'd expected me to accept their betrayal quietly. To hear it had fractured anyway felt like poetic justice. "The bank's considering removing Madison as CEO," James added. "They've asked your father for recommendations. He seemed to think that you might consider coming back if the terms were right." I laughed, surprising us both with its genuineness. "Go back? To be CEO of a vineyard I saved only to be betrayed? No, James. Hillcrest chose its path when they chose Madison. I've chosen mine." I gestured around the barn, which might have been simple but was filled with potential. "In 2 years, our first vintage will be ready. In 5, we'll be winning awards. In 10, Canyon Ridge will be synonymous with integrity and excellence. Why would I give that up for a vineyard that's already shown me exactly what my contribution is worth?" James nodded slowly, finishing his wine. "For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. This Pinot is exceptional, by the way. When can I buy a case?" 2027, I promised. "I'll make sure you're on the list." After he left, I walked through the vineyard as sunset painted the sky in shades of rosé. The young vines stood in perfect rows, their leaves rustling in the evening breeze. Somewhere across the valley, My family was dealing with the consequences of their choices. But here, in this place I'd built with my own hands and vision, I was creating something that no betrayal could touch. Winter arrived early that year, bringing unusual snow that blanketed the dormant vines. I used the quiet season to focus on the business side of the vineyard, building relationships with distributors and planning our marketing strategy. Unlike Madison's influencer-focused approach, I concentrated on building credibility within the wine industry itself. One snowy evening in December, as I reviewed architectural plans for our permanent tasting room, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Emma? The voice was familiar but aged, tired in a way I'd never heard before. It's Dad. I set down my pencil, my pulse quickening despite myself. What do you want? There was a long pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick with something that might have been regret. The bank removed Madison as CEO today. She falsified too many reports. They've given her a consultant role, but she has no real authority anymore. I waited, saying nothing. This felt like a conversation that had been building for over a year, and I wanted him to work for every word. They've appointed an interim CEO from their team, he continued. The vineyard's surviving, but it's not the same. The soul is gone. Everything's about metrics and efficiency now. Your grandfather would hate what it's become. Then you should have thought of that before mortgaging your integrity for Madison's MBA, I said quietly. I know, he said. And those two words carried more honesty than I'd heard from him in years. I know we failed you, Emma. We got so caught up in Madison's promises, her vision of modernization and growth, that we forgot what really mattered. We forgot that you were the one who understood the land, who carried forward Dad's real legacy. An apology without the words, I noted. But I wasn't the daughter who accepted crumbs anymore. What do you want, Dad? He sighed deeply. I want to know if there's any way forward. Any possibility of, I don't know, healing this rift. Your mother cries every time she drives past Canyon Ridge. Madison blames us for not fighting the bank harder. The family's torn apart, and it's our fault. I know that. But you're still my daughter, and I miss you. The words I'd wanted to hear for so long, arriving too late to matter. I'm not your daughter in any way that counts, I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. I'm a competitor now. Someone who learned that family can betray you worse than any enemy, because you never see it coming. You made that choice when you took my money and gave away my future. Emma, please. No, I interrupted. You don't get to please me anymore. You had your chance to make this right, and you chose to protect Madison and your pride instead. Now you get to live with those choices, just like I'm living with mine. The difference is, I'm building something honest here. Can you say the same? The silence stretched between us, like the miles between our vineyards. Finally, he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm proud of what you're building. I read the Wine Spectator article. Your grandfather would be too. I closed my eyes against the sudden sting of tears. Thank you for his journal. It's helped me more than you know. But that doesn't change anything between us. I know, he said again. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. What we lost when we lost you. What we threw away for nothing. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my office, watching snow fall on the vines outside. Somewhere, my father was probably sitting in his own office, the one where he'd promised to make me part of the legacy. I wondered if he could see the irony, that in trying to keep the vineyard in the family, he'd torn the family apart. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena. Test batch of cab scored 94 points from internal review. We're on track for something special. I smiled, the melancholy fading. Let my father have his regrets. I had vines to tend and wine to make. Spring of our second year brought unexpected challenges and equally unexpected allies. A late frost threatened our young vines, and I spent countless nights with the crew, monitoring temperatures and adjusting our protection systems. It was during one of those exhausting vigils that Susan Chen appeared at the vineyard. Susan was a legendary figure in California wine, a master sommelier who had discovered some of the region's most celebrated vintages. She stood at the edge of our vineyard at dawn, watching our frost protection system create rainbows in the early light. Impressive operation for such a young vineyard, she said by way of greeting. Most new owners would be asleep, letting the crew handle Frostwatch. I straightened from checking a temperature sensor, trying not to show how starstruck I was. The crew handles plenty, but I believe in being present for the critical moments. Can't ask them to care more than I do. Susan nodded approvingly. Your grandfather said something similar to me once, years ago. It's why Hillcrest wines had soul back then. She paused, studying me with sharp eyes. I hear that soul might be relocating to Canyon Ridge. We're trying to build something special here, I said carefully. What brings you to our valley at dawn? She smiled. Curiosity. The wine world's been buzzing about the financial consultant turned vintner, who's assembled one of the most talented teams in California. Elena Vasquez doesn't leave Napa for just anyone. And Marcus Chen's reputation for ethical business practices is sterling. I wanted to see what kind of operation attracts such talent. We spent the morning touring the vineyard, discussing everything from our sustainable farming practices to our plans for the tasting room. Susan asked probing questions about our philosophy, our goals, and our commitment to quality over quantity. By the time the sun had burned off the morning frost, I felt like I'd defended a doctoral thesis. Show me what Elena's been working on, she finally said, and I knew we'd passed the first test. In the barrel room, Susan tasted through our test batches with the focused intensity that had made her legendary. She said little, making notes in a small leather journal. When she finally spoke, her words changed everything. I'm organizing a blind tasting for charity next month. Top vintners, critics, and sommeliers judging New World wines against Old World classics. I'd like to include your test batch Pinot. It won't be for sale for another year, but if it shows well, it could establish Canyon Ridge before you even release your first vintage. My hands trembled slightly as I set down my wine thief. That's incredibly generous. May I ask why? Susan's expression softened slightly, because I remember a little girl who asked me a dozen questions about malolactic fermentation at a harvest party while her sister was taking selfies. Because your grandfather once told me his greatest hope was that one of his granddaughters would carry on his real legacy, not the business, but the love of the craft itself. She looked around the barrel room with its careful organization and pristine conditions, and because the wine world needs people who build from passion, not from spite. Most people in your position would have tried to destroy Hillcrest. You're trying to surpass it. That's much harder and much more admirable. The blind tasting Susan organized became the stuff of wine legend. Held at a prestigious San Francisco venue, it brought together the most discerning palates in the industry. Our Pinot was entered simply as Lot 47, with no indication of its origin. I didn't attend, too nervous to watch the judging, but Marcus went as our representative. His texts came in real time. First flight underway. Our Pinots in the second group. Judges spending a long time on Lot 47. Lots of discussion. Susan just smiled at me. I think that's good. Final results coming. Then nothing for 20 minutes that felt like hours. I paced the vineyard office, unable to focus on anything else. Finally, my phone rang. Emma. Marcus's voice was strange, thick with emotion. Lot 47 placed second overall. We beat out Premier Cruz from Burgundy. The judges want to know who made it. I sank into my chair, overwhelmed. Second place at Susan Chen's blind tasting. Before we'd even released our first commercial vintage. It was validation beyond my wildest hopes. The wine world exploded with curiosity about Canyon Ridge after the tasting results were published. Orders for futures poured in, restaurants wanting to secure allocations of our first release. Wine journalists requested interviews and tours, but the attention that mattered most came from an unexpected source. 3 weeks after the tasting, a handwritten letter arrived at the vineyard. The return address made my hands shake. Hillcrest Vineyard, but the handwriting was my mother's. Dear Emma, I heard about the blind tasting. Your father showed me the results, and I could see the pride in his eyes even as it broke his heart. We've lost so much because of our foolishness, but I need you to know that I'm genuinely happy for your success. Madison left last week. The restrictions and oversight became too much for her, and she's taken a marketing position with a tech company in San Francisco. She says wine is old-fashioned anyway, that the future is in cannabis beverages. I suppose we should have seen that coming. The vineyard continues under the bank's management, profitable but soulless. Your father spends most of his time in the archives now, reading his father's old notebooks and wondering where we went wrong. I've started volunteering at the local food bank, trying to find meaning beyond the business that consumed us. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a response. I just wanted you to know that every time I hear about Canyon Ridge's success, I think of you as a little girl, following your grandfather through the vines, asking endless questions about brix levels and phenolic ripeness. You were always the true heir to his legacy. We were just too blind to see it. Your mother, I read the letter 3 times before setting it aside. Part of me wanted to respond, to reach for the connection that had once defined my life. But I knew that bridge had burned beyond repair. Instead, I filed the letter away and returned to the work of building something that would last longer than family grudges or forgiven betrayals. The day of our first official vintage release arrived with the kind of perfect weather that made me believe in fate. September sunshine bathed Canyon Ridge in golden light as cars began arriving for our launch event. We'd kept it deliberately small, inviting only serious wine enthusiasts, industry professionals, and the critics who'd been following our story since that blind tasting triumph. Elena and I stood in the winery, doing one final check of everything. 3 years of work had led to this moment, the official birth of Canyon Ridge as a commercial winery. Our 2027 Pinot Noir and Chardonnay were ready to meet the world. Nervous? Elena asked, adjusting bottles in the tasting lineup. Terrified, I admitted. What if the blind tasting was a fluke? What if people are disappointed? She laughed, warm and reassuring. I've been making wine for 30 years, Emma. This vintage is special. Trust the wine, trust the work we've done. As guests began arriving, I recognized faces from across the wine world. Susan Chen was among the first, greeting me with a warm embrace. The success of your test batch at my tasting has had people counting days until this release, she said. The pressure's on. Catherine Wells from Wine Spectator arrived with a photographer, documenting the event for what she'd hinted would be a major feature. Restaurant sommeliers from San Francisco and Los Angeles mingled with distributors, all eager to taste what Canyon Ridge had created. I was greeting guests when Marcus appeared at my elbow, his expression unreadable. Emma, he said quietly, there's someone here you should know about. By the entrance. I looked over to see my grandfather's oldest friend, Robert Henley, a man who'd helped establish Hillcrest's reputation decades ago. He stood uncertainly at the edge of the crowd, clearly unsure of his welcome. I hadn't seen him since before the family fracture. Taking a deep breath, I walked over to greet him. Robert, I said, extending my hand. Thank you for coming. His weathered face creased into a smile as he shook my hand firmly. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Your grandfather would be bursting with pride today. He looked around appreciatively. You've built something remarkable here. Would you like a tour before the tasting begins? I offered, and his grateful nod told me he'd been hoping for exactly that. We walked through the vineyard slowly, Robert noting our trellising system and cover crops with approval. He stopped at a section where the vines looked particularly vigorous, bending to examine the soil. You planted these using your grandfather's spacing formula, he observed. Everyone says it's outdated, too labor-intensive, but he swore it made better wine. The best wines come from the hardest choices, I quoted, and Robert's eyes misted slightly. He said that every harvest, usually when your grandmother was complaining about the hours he spent in the vineyard. He straightened, looking toward Hillcrest, visible across the valley. I haven't been back there since the bank took over. Couldn't bear to see what it's become. We continued our walk in companionable silence until Robert spoke again. I know what happened, Emma. What they did to you. Your grandfather would have been furious. He always said you were the one who truly understood, who had the gift. They made their choice, I said simply. I made mine. Robert nodded slowly. And look what you've chosen to build. Not just a vineyard, but a philosophy. I've been watching your progress, reading about your sustainable practices, your commitment to the workers. This is what Hillcrest could have been if they'd chosen wisdom over flash. The tasting itself became one of those magical moments that define a winery's reputation. And as guests swirled and sipped our inaugural Pinot Noir, a hush fell over the room. I watched faces transform from polite interest to genuine amazement. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as people focused entirely on what was in their glasses. Susan Chen was taking notes furiously, her usual poker face cracked by obvious pleasure. A sommelier from the French Laundry was already on his phone, apparently calling the restaurant to discuss allocation. Catherine Wells caught my eye and mouthed, "Extraordinary," across the room, but it was Robert's reaction that moved me most. He stood apart from the crowd, holding his glass up to the light, then closing his eyes as he tasted. When he opened them, they were wet with tears. "This is it," he said when I approached. "This is what your grandfather was always reaching for, the perfect expression of place, of patience, of love. You've achieved something most winemakers only dream about." The reviews that followed our launch were beyond my wildest hopes. Wine Spectator gave our Pinot Noir 96 points, calling it a stunning debut that announces Canyon Ridge as a major force in American winemaking. The Chardonnay earned 94 points, and similar praise. Orders flooded in faster than we could process them, and we sold out of our entire first vintage within a week. But success brought unexpected challenges. 2 weeks after our launch, I received a certified letter that made my blood run cold. It was from a law firm representing Hillcrest Vineyard, claiming that I had violated a non-compete agreement by hiring their former employees and using proprietary information. I called Sophia immediately. "Can they do this?" I asked, fury and fear warring in my chest. She reviewed the letter quickly. "It's desperation disguised as legal action. You never signed a non-compete, and the employees you hired left Hillcrest voluntarily. As for proprietary information, the techniques you're using are either industry standard or came from your grandfather's personal notes, which your father gave you. They have no case. Then why are they doing this?" "Because you're succeeding," she said simply. "Your wines are already commanding higher prices than Hillcrest's. Restaurants are dropping their wines for yours. This isn't about law, it's about intimidation." The legal threat turned out to be Madison's last desperate attempt to sabotage my success. Without my parents' knowledge, she'd convinced a lawyer friend to send the letter, hoping to create enough fear or bad publicity to damage our reputation. When Sophia responded with a cease and desist of our own, threatening counteraction for harassment, the matter quickly died. But it led to one final family confrontation. A week after the legal threat dissolved, my father appeared at Canyon Ridge. I was in the barrel room with Elena when Marcus found me. "Your father's here," he said carefully. "He says he needs 5 minutes. Should I call security?" I considered it, then shook my head. "No. I'll see him, but stay close." I found him in the tasting room, looking older and more fragile than I'd ever seen him. He was studying our awards wall, where reviews and accolades were beginning to accumulate. "I didn't know about the letter," he said without turning around. Madison acted alone. When I found out, I made her withdraw it immediately. She's spiraling, Emma. Blames everyone but herself for her failures." I waited, saying nothing. I'd learned the power of silence in negotiations. He finally turned to face me. I came to apologize, not for her, but for everything, for choosing the easy path over the right one, for betraying your trust for an illusion of success, for failing you as a father. The words I'd waited years to hear, delivered in a tasting room that existed because of his betrayal. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "I accept your apology," I said finally, "but it doesn't change anything. You made choices that broke us beyond repair. I've built something here without you, in spite of you. That can't be undone with words." He nodded, seeming to shrink further. "I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation. I just needed you to know that I see it now, all of it. The reviews of your wines, the respect you've earned, the integrity of what you've built. This is what we could have had together if we'd been wiser. But we weren't," I said gently. "And now we each have to live with what we've chosen." "There's one more thing," he said, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a small leather box and set it on the tasting bar between us. "This was your grandfather's. He wore it every day in the vineyard. Your grandmother gave it to me when he passed, but it belongs with you now." Inside was a simple silver pocket watch, its face worn smooth by decades of checking harvest timing. I remembered it hanging from his vest as he taught me to read the vines. My throat tightened with unexpected emotion. "Thank you," I managed. He moved toward the door, then paused. "The bank's putting Hillcrest up for sale. They've given up trying to revive it. Madison destroyed too much too quickly. I wanted you to hear it from me in case you were interested." I looked at him steadily. "I'm not. Canyon Ridge is my home now. But I hope someone who loves the land buys it. Grandpa's vines deserve better than they've gotten." He nodded once and left. I stood in my tasting room, holding my grandfather's watch, feeling the weight of everything that had brought me to this moment. Outside, workers were preparing for the next day's harvest, our fourth at Canyon Ridge. We'd expanded carefully, adding acreage and staff, building something sustainable and real. That evening, as the sun set over the valley, I gathered with my team to celebrate our success. Elena raised a toast to the future. Marcus shared projections that showed us profitable beyond our best scenarios. And the crew members who'd become like family laughed and told stories of the harvest to come. I stepped outside for a moment of quiet, looking across at Hillcrest in the distance. Soon it would belong to someone else, another chapter in its long history. But here at Canyon Ridge, I was writing my own story, one vintage at a time. My phone buzzed with a message from Susan Chen. "Heard Hillcrest is for sale. Also heard Canyon Ridge is expanding. The valley's changing of the guard is complete. Your grandfather would be proud." I tucked the phone away and checked the time on my grandfather's watch, now repaired and keeping perfect time. The harvest moon was rising, full and golden, blessing the vines with its light. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that excellence could grow from the ashes of betrayal. But tonight, surrounded by the team that had become my chosen family, holding the watch that connected me to the best of my heritage while standing free from its worst, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete and perfect peace. The grapes were ready, the team was ready, and finally, so was I. Canyon Ridge wasn't just a vineyard anymore. It was proof that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's the simple, powerful act of becoming everything they said you couldn't be, and doing it with grace. As the celebration continued behind me, I walked among the vines one more time, running my hands along the leaves that would soon give us another vintage. Each plant was a testament to choosing the difficult path, to building rather than destroying, to turning pain into purpose. The story that had begun with a desperate phone call and a transfer of life savings had become something neither my family nor I could have imagined. They'd thought they were taking my money. Instead, they'd given me my freedom. And with that freedom, I'd built an empire of integrity, one grape at a time.